Welcome to the show, everyone. Today's guest is me. I'm Eric Sardina, and I'm the host of the Return to Authenticity podcast. And this is a wrap-up episode from what is now ending season 4, and for season 5 that's about to kick off in 2026. Thought this might be a nice way to wrap up season 4 is to share a few things about the podcast. This season, in season 4, which really took place over 2025, and now we're into January of 2026, I've put up 20 episodes on the podcast platform this season. It's by far my smallest season to date. Number of reasons for that. I've got on the platform right now 133 episodes, going all the way back to the first episode on March the 9th of 2022. So just finishing up again our 4th season, put 20 shows up. I've got another 3 that are being produced, which will be episodes numbers 134, 135, and 136. And that will likely conclude season 4. So we're coming to an end. Those shows will be up on the podcast platform, on all platforms, Spotify, YouTube, all the places where you can find podcasts. They'll be up there likely by the end of January, and that will conclude. I have one more episode to record, so that one would be 137, and that might be, depending if I can get that recorded as I plan to. Sometimes that can be a little dicey. We've already had to reschedule once, so we'll see. So it's going to be somewhere around 136, 137 on the platform as we wrap up season 4. As I mentioned, this was the smallest year to date, and really a number of factors for that. This is a hobby project of mine. I absolutely adore and love being a host of this show and getting to meet some incredible humans. And at the same time, I have other things that I do that pay the bills, right? So I had a really busy year this year. Life got kind of crazy, a little chaotic in the middle of the year, throwing some curveballs, as will happen in all of our lives. And it forced me to really focus on other areas of my business and areas that put food on my table, my family's table, and focus on some projects that were keeping me really, really busy. So the podcast took a bit of a back seat, not a bit of, it took a back seat. And I focused on those areas that I needed to focus on. That said, I fully plan to keep moving forward as I look into season 5. So for those that are new to the show, or maybe are just finding this episode, I interview guests that tell these incredible stories of making these inspiring pivots in their lives toward their authentic selves, or they work really hard to stay true to their authentic self and who they believe they were created by God to be, right? And so they tell these really awesome stories. And I've had a whole host of folks on, from a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people that have started their own business in the face of real life changes. Either they got laid off from a job, or they had a death in their family, or a death of a loved one, a spouse. Sometimes they just felt very unfulfilled in what they were doing, and so they made an intentional change. And they tell these really awesome stories. And so all sorts of entrepreneurs and people that work for others for a living. Some are personal stories, some are business stories, etc. So I invite you to go back and check out a lot of those. Check out my guests. They're all fabulous. And so as I started to think about what do I want to focus on in this new season ahead, a few things come to mind. One is likely the volume of shows is going to remain or decline slightly from what it's been in the past. In the past, I would put out a show every Wednesday, and that was pretty consistent. Not pretty consistent, I was consistent on that through the first few seasons. This past year, again in season 4, I fell off of that. So what used to be a new show every Wednesday, missing a few here and there, became a burst of shows, and then 5 or 6 or 8 weeks without any shows, and then another burst of shows like that. And so as I look forward into season 5, likely what this will be is a show that comes out once a month, and that will depend on the recording volume, as always, right? That does dictate my ability to put shows out, is how quickly and how readily I can get guests interviewed. And so I'm thinking it's going to become more of a show that's putting out 12 to maybe 15 or so episodes a year, as opposed to what in the past was somewhere between 35 and 50 episodes a year. That volume is going to be too high, given some current projects that I've got on my plate that are going to demand quite a bit of my time in the new year. So with that said, as I started to think about, if I'm only going to do 12 to 15 shows, what do I want this new season of Return to Authenticity to look like? And what I kept coming back to is I love and I'm inspired personally by people that have invented things, created things, innovated things from scratch. So brought products or things to life that did not exist before. Sometimes they're starting entire new industries. Others, they are in an existing industry, but they have taken a very unique slant to it, which when you're starting something in, whether it's a brand new industry or an existing one, you've got to figure out how to be competitive, how to create something that the market wants and demands. And I found those stories to be some of the ones that inspired me the most. When I look back at some of the 133 guests that I've got on the platform now, and I think about some examples of those stories, right? All the way back to episode 33, I had met a guy through the internet that I followed his Instagram, a guy named Greg Westgate. And Greg is a knife maker. He makes these incredible custom knives. And I own one of Greg's knives now. I bought it after the show, after I recorded with him. And so basically, Greg lives up in northern Michigan. He's a real outdoorsy guy, spends a lot of times out in the woods. He built a really incredible house that he documented on his Instagram in the woods. And so a very outdoorsy kind of guy. And most of the handles, if not all the handles, of the knives that he makes come from something he has found in the woods, a piece of bark, wood. In my case, the knife that I have, the handle is made out of a giant mushroom that he found, that he takes back. It was a petrified mushroom. He has this incredible process where he whittles the whatever it is down, the wood or the bark, or in this case mushroom. Then he coats it in epoxy and he makes these incredible knife handles, unique, one-of-a-kind things. Interesting story on Greg is he was discovered he submitted and sent a knife, I think more than one knife, and a story, because he's also a writer, to Jack Carr, who I'm a big fan of Jack Carr and his books. He sent it to Jack Carr and Jack Carr's podcast called Danger Close Podcast. And Jack had him on the gear section of his podcast at the end of his show. Greg didn't even know it. I was listening to the show. I heard him talk about Greg's knives, and he showed one of his knives. And I called Greg and texted him and said, hey, it's incredible you're on Jack Carr's show. And he didn't know what I was talking about. He went and found it. So a great guy. Another person that found Greg was Chad, and I'll get his last name wrong, Robichaux, I think it is. And he acquired a bunch of knives as gifts for a big event that he was hosting. So Greg is a legit knife maker, and there are some great knife makers out there. Greg is certainly one of them. So episode 33, check out Greg Westgate. Another gentleman I met online is a guy named John Jackson, episode 67. John is from Scotland, and he's got I don't know if you would call it a traditional or it's an epically giant beard, right? And he's always, I think, been a beard guy, big beard. And he stumbled through a crazy story that we talk about on my show, has a terrible bike accident. He's a competitive bike racer, has a terrible bike accident. And while he's recovering, his wife was going through, I think it was massage therapy school, and learning all about oils and therapeutic oils and oils that can help you to heal and things like that. And so he started playing around with oil for his beard and trying to make it more, pliable and less beard dandruff and stuff like that, while he was injured and couldn't do a lot of other things. He ends up inventing a beard oil. And he tells a story. This was before beards were even a big deal, and a lot of guys were wearing beards. He's like, there were pockets of guys who were wearing beards, but not the numbers that are now doing it. And now beard oil is everywhere. But John invented this beard oil out of nothing, and he really had to work incredibly hard in order to get this product off the ground that no one even understood what it was or why you would want a beard oil. And yet he persevered, and he's got this now a beard oil that he's made. And I bought some of that as well, and it is cool. My beard doesn't really need a lot of oil, but it is definitely a really nice product. And he's now he is sponsored various, I think, motocross racers and a variety of sports athletes and some musical events and things like that. So his company's really taken off. And there's been a whole host of them. Another few that come to mind, Josh Goodman, episode 74. He invented because he was frustrated that he couldn't get a drink at a bar, in a timely way when the bar was crowded, he thought, well, there's got to be a way to have a sort of a toll tag type technology where you could pour your own drink and it would keep track of it and charge you appropriately. He invented that. He invented a toll tag for the alcohol, or for a beverage industry, really. It's gone much broader than just alcohol or beer to all sorts of beverages. Tells a really compelling story there of, again, brand new technology. No one knew what or why you would want it. There was a ton of questions on whether it would even be a good idea to do it, and so forth. And so, but he pressed on through it all, and he brought this product to life. Megan Reamer invented a healthy snack chip for her son who passed, God rest his soul, but he had a really debilitating illness and disease that would not allow him to keep a lot of food down and keep any weight on, and so she and her husband came up with a chip that her son Jackson enjoyed, but that also was super healthy, and used oils like avocado oil, which at the time were never used in chips and snack chips and things like that. Now you're starting to see little boutique industries pop up around that. But she was the first, and Jackson's chips. They were on Shark Tank. It was the most watched episode, or the second most episode in the history of Shark Tank, where she talks about Jackson's chips. Really inspiring, emotional story, fantastic, entrepreneur and mom, and just a great story there. Gerard White, a friend of mine that went through the summit that I ran for a period of time back a couple years ago. Gerard was one of the participants, and he ended up starting a t-shirt company that had scriptural references on the front, scriptural Bible verses, things like that, as the slogans and the words on his t-shirts. And whether really this wasn't a thing at the time when he started it, and now you're seeing more and more of these shirt companies pop up that have a faith-based, religious-based messages on them. Really awesome. Gerard's a fantastic guy. He's doing incredible things in the space that he's in growing this t-shirt company. Gerard was episode number 103. All right, so if I think about guests that I would love to have on the show, and an example of a story that I'll share a little bit with you here if you don't already know it. Many of the folks in my circle know this company, and it's probably because once we see something that someone has bought or owns or is wearing or using, we tend to go, hey, what's that? And then more guys end up with that same gear. And that is a company called OriginUSA, and the CEO, co-founder is a guy named Pete Roberts. Now, when we talk about inventors and creators, Pete has an incredible and amazing story, and something that I love the story, and I would love to have him on as a guest to be able to let him tell his story far better than what I will do here, and just giving you a few bits of information about them for those that don't know the origin story. So basically, Pete grew up in New England. He's a New Englander, and if you know New England, they at one point in time were just a bastion of American textile manufacturing. Boots, jeans, all sorts of gear was produced in factories up in the New England area. And then I think the timing was somewhere maybe in the 90s or maybe in the late 80s. If you remember Ross Perot, senior, not junior, senior, uttered the phrase, "the giant sucking sound of American jobs going overseas," he said would happen as a result of a NAFTA trade agreement getting signed. And he was very much on point, right? He was very, very much correct on that. So what was just entire communities of industry up in the Northeast in textile manufacturing, slowly but surely started to get offshored overseas. So the manufacture of goods started to get sent to places like China, Vietnam, Thailand, India, et cetera, right? So overseas manufacturing. And it was done simply for labor arbitrage, right? You could get things built overseas far cheaper than you could using American labor. And we were told at the time that was a good thing, that it was going to result in products being more affordable, and then there was this line that I've got in my head that I've heard said over and over, and I heard it said even recently by what would be called a shoe dog, a person that's manufactured shoes their whole life, said it on a recent podcast that I listened to, that American kids don't want to go to work in textile manufacturing factories, right? Nobody wants those jobs. Let's give them to someone else overseas. And I think that's nonsense for simply this reason. We don't hear people say that about the American automobile industry, right? We have plenty of automobile manufacturing going on in this country. We don't hear about the aerospace industry. We have lots of aerospace manufacturing going on in this country. And then you think about all the support manufacturing that goes in around those industries. My first job out of school, I went to work for a defense contractor, General Dynamics. They had a 1 mile long assembly line. They were manufacturing the F-16 fighter plane in that plant. And I love fighter planes. I grew up a kid loving aerospace. And like a lot of kids, I didn't want to be a fighter pilot when I grew up. Didn't happen. But I loved walking down that assembly line and seeing what started off at one end of the plant, just billet aluminum, and at the other end, a fully ready to roll out and be test flighted F-16 fighter plane. And all along that 1 mile long plant, there were assemblies being made for that plane, right? Incredible. And these were workers that were making great livings and make great livings and take care of their families and so forth. And there's a manufacturing environment. And then you think about all the support businesses that are making little tiny sub-assemblies and subcomponents for that airplane that was being produced in Fort Worth, Texas. Again, no one said, oh, no one wants those jobs, right? It's a terrible, no, of course, those are great jobs. And similarly for the automobile industry, we've got now BMWs are made in, I think it's in South Carolina or somewhere in the Southeast. Obviously, you've got the big three auto manufacturers making automobiles up in Detroit. So great manufacturing jobs. And yet with textiles, it was this idea that no one wants those jobs, let's send them overseas. And so you have companies like Timberland, LL Bean, American, when you think about like American outdoor gear, they used to be made here. Now they're all made overseas. Even companies with great American histories like Nike, who used to, the founder of Nike, Phil Knight, he was making Nike sneakers in his kitchen, selling them out of the trunk of his car, and then eventually growing that business, producing them here, and then eventually producing them overseas, right? And all Nikes being made overseas. And then you have all the chaos that happens around slave labor and unhealthy and inhuman work environments and things that go on in other countries where you have less control over how the workers being treated. Nike got caught up in that. They basically said they had no idea. They were using a contract manufacturer that ended up using another contract manufacturer. Somehow or other, they said that they certainly didn't know that those work conditions existed. Whatever, right? When we control the work conditions in the United States, we can be held accountable to the conditions. And we know that if we provide a work environment that's not acceptable, people aren't going to come to work there, right? They don't want that. They want to work in a good environment. Okay, back to Pete Roberts. So Pete sees this, the decline and the demise of textile manufacturing in New England and all these shuttered factories. And he has on his YouTube channel, he has a great mini documentary about this. And he interviews some of the folks that worked in those plants that eventually lost their jobs as those plants got closed. And these were people that they raised their families on what were great jobs. They enjoyed that work. And then there's even in that documentary, a sandwich company, a company that served breakfast, lunch, and dinner to the workers of that plant. They end up going out of business because no workers, no more need for food, right? Out of that restaurant. So they go out of business. And a lot of these towns almost shrunk and died in many cases because of the loss of this industry that went overseas. Well, Pete said, Pete at the time was an entrepreneur. He was also a jiu-jitsu practitioner. He is a jiu-jitsu practitioner, a very elite level, a black belt, and highly competitive when he was a younger man, all that stuff, competing. And he had textile manufacturing in his family. People know how to sew. They knew how to make garments, things like that. And while he was competing, he recognized that the quality of the gis that he could get or that he was seeing at competitions were substandard. He didn't like them. And he thought, I'm going to design one for myself and make a gi for myself. Now, pardon any errors in this story, because again, I'm telling it from my own knowledge and doing some research and again, following this company now for what's close to a decade. But he decides he's going to make some of his own gis for himself. And at competitions, people are like, those are awesome gis. Where did you get that? I want one. And he's like, I made it myself. And they start asking, well, would you make me one? And so this is the birth of a company, right? He starts making gis for other competitors and making gis, and that line, that becomes bigger and bigger part of his life. And then he decides, well, what about jeans? Why couldn't we make jeans here, right? And so then Pete goes about trying to find a loom, a machine that will weave jean material, right? And he finds one in one of these mothballed factories, and he buys it. But now he's got to find an operator for the loom itself. He's got to find an operator. So he begins looking for someone that could run this loom, operate it, maintain it, fix it when it breaks, all those things that you have to do with heavy machinery. And he finds this old guy who's been retired who says, I can run that loom, and I can show you how to use it, right? And so he hires this guy to begin as his first employee, I believe his first employee, to start making this product line for him, this jeans. And they start to realize, man, we were that close to losing the knowledge that went into making this product, where it had been shipped overseas now for so many decades, and it had been almost lost to our knowledge base. But he found this one guy that could do it. And that gentleman, he starts making videos then and teaching the next generation, the younger generation, to how to operate this loom. And they think, man, if he passes, if he dies, we're going to lose this knowledge. So they begin to capture, and he's recording, and he works for them for years and years and years. Eventually, I think recently, he did pass away, right? He's very old, and he passed away. But the knowledge now has been handed on, and there's a next generation now of people with this knowledge in this technology, right? So OriginUSA, they start small. They have jeans, and they have a couple other things, and they begin to grow and to grow and to grow, right? Now they've got shirts, t-shirts, they have an athletic line, they have a hunting apparel line, they have casual pants, khakis, and all of their gear is built with this pride of ownership, this pride of manufacturing, and this idea of building it overbuilt, right? So their gear is all overbuilt. I'm actually wearing two of their shirts. I'm wearing their field shirt right now, this dark shirt, field shirt, super comfortable. The stitching, everything about it is just, you can tell it was made by people who have a pride in what they're doing. They care about what they're doing. They care about what comes out off the line, what goes out into the hands of the people that are buying their gear, right? The underneath shirt is a Waffle Henley. It's become like my favorite shirt, super soft, comfortable, warm, perfect for Texas winters, which I'm sitting in right now. It's about 65 degrees. Not that cold, but it's perfect gear for that kind of base layer or middle layer, and love their stuff, right? I have so much of their gear. I've got boots. He's come out with a whole line of boots, super hardy, great American bison. That's what I would add to the story too. So Pete decided that when he was going to do this, that not only was he going to bring back on shore American manufacturing, but he was going to only use American raw materials. So the cotton that's in all his gear is from American farmers. The cotton's not coming from India or some cheap source or wherever else you might be able to find it cheaper. He sources it right here in the United States. The buttons, the zippers, the rivets, the nylon thread, everything is 100% American sourced, right? That's part of the credo of the company, is that it's American from the I think he says from the field to the, it's like from the field to the fabric, or from the stitch to the shirt or something. It's all American raw material. So it's incredible, right? Which I love the idea that he's bringing this back. Now, he also shared recently, they did, I think, around 30,000 orders this Christmas. And it wasn't that long ago, maybe 7 years ago, they did one order. They had one or two orders, a handful of orders, and now 30,000. Now, could they do 1 million orders? Probably not. He's probably not geared up or prepared for that. And I started to think, man, how complex is it to run a business like this? You've got to acquire the raw material, the yarn, the cotton. You've got to weave it and make it into goods that then you can sell, which most retailers are making their money on Black Friday. And so he's got to sell it. So he's got to anticipate, what are people going to want? How much do I put on inventory? How much am I ready to deliver? I don't want to have to tell somebody it's going to be 6 or 8 or 10 weeks for you to get your gear, and it's because we didn't make enough of it. At the same time, I can't afford to have reams and reams of shirts sitting on a shelf past Christmas, because likely then they're not going to get sold for another year. That's an investment in inventory that could be devastating. So you've got to balance all this in and out. And I think, man, the ingenuity, the courage, the discipline and the precision that's got to go into a business like that is just, it's incredible. And the courage, again, to have the willingness to put yourself out there. He talks in one of his videos about he got a second mortgage on his house to fund the initial start of Origin. And he's been married to his, I think from his, to his high school sweetheart. So they've been married a long time. And she had to be willing to say, okay, yeah, let's go get a second mortgage on the house to start a business that we have no proof will work. And in fact, everyone is telling us it won't work because you're not going to be able to manufacture things in this country at a price point that a consumer will buy. And certainly their gear is a little more expensive than what you can go buy, go down the street to Kohl's or wherever and buy something that's been made some far off land. But again, the quality's there. And for me, I'd rather spend a little bit more and get super high quality that I know is going to last, that I also can be excited and proud that the cotton came from an American farmer, the labor was done by an American worker. And it was funny, when all the tariff stuff was going on a year or so ago, and Trump was launching all these new tariffs and stuff, he put a video out, Pete did, and he said, man, I've got to tell you what all these tariffs mean to our business. They mean absolutely nothing because we import nothing. Everything is built and done right here in the US, so tariffs have no impact on our business, right? That was a pretty cool thing to be able to say, especially, I'm sure, given that everyone told him he was a fool for not importing all this product and sending the labor out to have to then bring it back into the United States, that he was told that he was a fool for that, and yet it paid off at that point, certainly. So really incredible story. I love it. I love all the gear that they're putting out, right? The boots, they've got some more casual boots that are coming out now. Again, I have a sandal. I wish I had brought it out here. I didn't. But they make I think he calls it his combat flip-flop or something. But it's like a sandal. And the reason for the combat, I think, is so he partnered up with Jocko Willink I don't know how many years ago, some point in their journey, they partnered up. Jocko's a former Navy SEAL, very, very well known, does all sorts of things himself, great businessman, author, consultant, speaker, has a giant podcast, all that. I'm sure you've heard of Jocko. But they're partners in Origin. And so a lot of their gear has sort of some of the military flair to it in terms of names and wanting things to be very robust, things like that. And so he's got these combat flip-flops. I've had a lot of flip-flops over the years. I would tell you I've never had a finer flip-flop than the one I got from Origin, right? It's American cowhide or rawhide, super well built, stitching, every little detail is just spot on. It's fantastic. So I'm telling Pete's story here. I would love to have Pete on the show and be able to interview him, and it would be truly an honor to do it. So if anyone has any access to Pete, I'm going to be reaching out to him directly. Would certainly love any assistance in that regard in getting to Pete. His company, my feeling is about to blow up. Right now, they do all their sales through online, right? So it's only an online. They don't have any retail stores. I'm going to bet that in the next year, that's going to change. You'll start to see their product in other retailers, or you're going to start to see OriginUSA stores popping up around the country. A lot like Black Rifle Coffee. Initially, you could only buy online. Now there's Black Rifle Coffee stores around the country. I'm a big fan of Black Rifle Coffee as well. And so I think you're going to start to see that with Origin. I think this will be the last year that they are this best kept secret and known only in certain pockets. I think next year and beyond, Origin is going to explode. I just have to believe, because their product lines are all coming in fast and furious, more and more products, super high quality. He's bringing on some key players onto his team. He brought on Kip Fulks this year onto their board of directors. And I think Kip has another role within the company in charge of product. Kip was one of the original founders of Under Armour. So he's bringing on some real heavy hitters to help him scale the company and take it to the next level. So I'm excited for what's going to happen at Origin. This is going to be a fantastic story. Again, I couldn't be more excited to see what's to come for Pete at OriginUSA. So that's an example. Another one that comes to mind is Aries Watch Company, right? So Matt Graham is a guy up in Washington, and he has a great background of service, right? So he was a cop. Then he went into the Air Marshal service right after 9/11 happened, and the Air Marshal's program exploded, but they needed a very, very high quality Air Marshal. And he was part of that initial selection process, became an Air Marshal, did that for a number of years, and he went into the CIA. And once he came out of that life of service, his wife asked him, what next? Like, what do you want to do? And he's like, I've always wanted to make watches. I've always wanted to be a watchmaker. And so he starts making watches up in Washington, USA, right? Washington State. I've got one of their watches on now. The company's called Aries. They're super robust mission timers. Again, they're made there, serviced there. If you ever have an issue, they're guaranteed for life. I love Matt's story. He's building a great company up in Washington. I wish I lived closer to Washington because they also have bourbon nights on Wednesday nights and get-togethers and all sorts of things that they do as they're building their community up there. But again, been fun to watch him scale his business and grow it from a single mission timer, a single watch, to now a platform of watches. He's got a field watch. He's also got a GMT and I think a few others. He's does some special one-offs, collaborations with other companies, things like that. He did one collab with Montana Knife Company. He's done collabs with Jack Carr and the Crossed Tomahawks and some really cool stuff. So love Aries. Would love to have a chance to interview Matt. I'll be reaching out to Matt directly as well. Montana Knife Company is another one. I don't know a ton about them. Or Half Face Blades, another knife company. But again, guys making knives right here in the United States. And innovators, entrepreneurs, love what they're doing, love their products, and would love to have a chance to interview them as well. So I'm going to end it there. This has gone a lot longer than I thought it would. I told a lot more of Origin's story than I anticipated I might, but it's just, I love that story. I love everything that they're doing at Origin, and so it gets infectious, and I love talking about it. I encourage you to check out Origin. But what I would also ask for you, for my listeners, for those that are watching this, in the comments, if you would put in there, if there is someone that is an innovator, an inventor, a creator, a builder that you would love for me to interview on the show, please put it in the comments and I'll reach out to them directly. If you can make any sort of an introduction, that's great, but it's not needed. I'll be happy to take it from there and reach out directly as well. And really proud of what we've done here on Return to Authenticity, proud of the show. I think we're a top single digit, we're a top 8-9% podcast that's out there. And I'm truly honored that, how that's happened is folks like yourself watching the show and sharing the program and writing a comment and giving us a nice review and all those things. And they help us reach more and more people. So I would encourage you, please keep doing that, and I'll keep putting out content. If you've got someone that you'd like me to interview, please share that as well. You can send me a DM if you'd rather and do that, and I'll be happy to follow up. So with that, I would say happy 2026 ahead. I can't wait to start recording season 5 of Return to Authenticity. Please go check out season 4, season 3, season 2, and season 1. And thank you so much for all that you do. Bye for now.